Welcome back to Amplify Your Garden as the podcast. So last time we talked quite a bit about some flowers in the garden, the ones that we have growing. So we'd like to continue that conversation and maybe talk a little bit about some of the pollinators that those flowers can attract and why that's important. So if we just take a step back, and Hannah, I'm going to ask you to jump into here. The reason we need pollinators is to make sure that our plants pollinate so that way they can get a fruit. So I know, Hannah, you've done some self-pollinating, so if you wouldn't mind touching on that real quick.
Yeah, I know one of the biggest things when I've grown like squash or cucumbers or zucchinis or any of those type of plants that have like the big blooming yellow flowers on them, sometimes you'll notice, depending on your plant and how many pollinators you have around, you'll notice you might be getting starts of the vegetables or fruits, but they seem to die off not too long after.
Prematurely.
Yeah, and they'll just start turning yellow and they won't grow. And that's normally because they're not getting pollinated. And I see this a lot with like pumpkin growers too. Like if you're growing pumpkin for sport or for for sport, but for
commercially
or competition or something, people will self-pollinate the stems that they think will be the best option for the plant. And they take, so on one of those types of plants, there's two different types of the flowers. There's the male and the female. The males have a little, it looks like a little stick called a stigma, and you take that and you just pollinate the female flowers, which the female flowers are the ones that have the fruit growing.
The little baby one, yeah.
So like if you have I don't think cucumbers as much because those flowers are
so real small.
But
it would be difficult with
watermelons, pumpkins, zucchini, squash, cantaloupe, like all those kinds of different plants. You can take in the mornings, especially because that's when the flowers are open. You can take the flower, break off the males because the males don't grow the fruit.
Right.
Break off a male flower, and it's going to be the one that has the stem in it or the stigma in it, and just pollinate, stick that stigma,
the male flower and the female.
Yes, and then just like kind of get that pollen in the female flower, and that helps with pollinating.
Yeah. That's interesting because I've noticed. So I grow pumpkins at home, and every year there's some that for unknown reason they die and they rot on the vine, and I bet that's probably what's going on. It's not all of them, but I bet that is because they're in an old cattle pasture. There's no flowers really, like no sunflowers or zinnias around.
Things bringing in the pollinators.
Right, so maybe that's what I should do in the future is just plant a couple flowers here and there just to see if that helps.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's something that I didn't know until just now.
And I was going to say, even if you do have the pollinators and if you're growing pumpkins to sell or just want to like be very sure that they're getting pollinated, it doesn't hurt to do that.
Right.
Even if there are bees around.
Right. And if you're, like you said, if you're growing it for competition, you want the big pumpkin, you want to make sure that they're getting pollinated. Or if you only have a handful of pumpkins that you're just growing, for your doorstep, that would be not out of the question labor-wise. I would think like commercial pumpkin growers, there's no way that they'd have enough time to hand pollinate all those pumpkins.
Right. Well, I know I was going to say, to piggyback on that, a lot of like the competition ones, at least the videos I've seen on TikTok, their plants, like they're big, all the vines and everything that lead back to one plant, they'll most likely only try and get one pumpkin out of it because
conserve the resources.
Yes. Then that one pumpkin grows bigger. So that's where I've seen it a lot.
But that's similar to like whenever you prune the bottom leaves of a tomato plant.
Yeah.
To help focus the energy in one spot.
Yeah. But I think that's why maybe they hand pollinate.
Yeah.
So they can kind of like pick whichever.
Right.
And even if you start growing, I've seen a video where the person growing them cuts one of them off to conserve the energy to bring it towards the other.
Yeah, pumpkin. It's a control. You're controlling.
Yeah. Right. I mean, granted, if you're doing this for like squash or zucchini, it's
maybe
a completely different story. But I have seen it. I've had a zucchini plant where I'd have the fruits start to grow, and then like a week later, it's not getting any bigger and it's turning yellow.
Yeah.
And that's 95% probably because it's not getting pollinated. So
fortunately, we haven't had any of that with the zucchinis out here.
Right.
Where they just die off.
Yeah.
because we do have those
We have plenty of flowers
out there,
greenage,
plenty of food.
Yeah.
And speaking of flowers, so the ones that we have growing are sunflowers, zinnias, and marigolds actually help attract them in. But really the sunflowers and the zinnias are what's pulling a lot of the pollen. But you want something that is continuously blooming. So the zinnias, they are a cut and come again flower, so they just keep blooming and keep blooming.
Throughout
and
the
we
whole summer,
we briefly touched on that earlier this week, and just in a real short video on Facebook, we talked about that.
Yep.
But we want to keep those flowers blooming. Sunflowers, not so much, but the bees love sunflowers. So once those sunflowers bloom, they're done. But our sunflowers have lots of blooms on them.
They do. They have a ton.
So that's something else. And then, and I've noticed this even at home because I have lavender in my landscaping. And I didn't realize this, but lavender will also bring in some bees, which is fine, but they're right by my house. So I'm always like cognizant of, I don't want the bees inside my house. Right. So I try to keep them because they're right by the door that we use most of the time.
The one thing I am curious about with pollination is, and this is a learning podcast, but with when you have plants that are growing vegetables or fruits like tomatoes, outside of the like zucchinis and stuff we just talked about, do those also need to be pollinated, or do they self-pollinate? Because I know some plants self-pollinate, some don't.
I know, like green beans are fairly self-pollinated. Sweet corn is cross-pollinated, so as long as the pollen on the tassel falls,
right,
and that's a lot by
on that as well.
Yeah, that's a lot by wind. And something that we learned this year is we need to have more than one row of sweet corn to help with that pollination. I think that one row of sweet corn is struggling because there was only one row, so we were kind of relying on that pollen to fall straight down when in reality that's not necessarily how that happens. As far as tomatoes go, I do think that tomatoes need some kind of pollinator. And I know, like, even with green beans, you can hand pollinate those as well. But I think the biggest concern is just making sure that the pollen from the male part of the plant hits the female part. And that's done various ways. But I think keeping the bees and the hummingbirds and the butterflies, making sure those are around, making sure those are your friend, is extremely beneficial in more ways than one. And then too, with the bees, if you have bees hanging around, maybe get some honeybees and just have that going on too.
I've heard of people keeping bees around, literally purposely keeping bees for pollination. But I know in the last video that we did, we talked a lot about flowers. But we didn't really touch on why, the reasons to keep them around to benefit your garden. We really just touched on the way they look and why, the prettiness of keeping them around. But I definitely think that it's important to have flowers. We have them bordered around our garden or sporadically throughout, or however you're going to do it. Because it guarantees almost that you're going to keep those around.
It's under advertised benefit to the garden.
Right.
So before this year, I had never put flowers in any garden, and then we did it out here, and I absolutely love it. I love having it. Looks nice, but it's serving a great purpose because we haven't had any pollination issues outside of the one row of sweet corn, but that has nothing to do with it.
It's a little bit different story.
But we haven't had any issues, and there's always bees out there, and I mean, I've never gotten stung, so they pretty much leave us alone. They're just there to get the nectar and eat. So it is. I'm glad you brought that up because it is important to keep them around. Because if you don't want to hand pollinate, like if you're not growing competition big pumpkins, you don't have to pollinate. Just drop a couple flowers in the ground and let them go.
You have
They just need food.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah. And I guess along with that, like hummingbirds.
Yeah.
Keep a hummingbird. What it was called, like the nectar.
Yeah.
Get a hummingbird feeder. If you wanted that, but
yeah, and those are super interesting to watch too. I'm not a huge bird watcher, but I seen a hummingbird going around some hanging baskets around my house, and my husband was talking to me. He was, "Are you even listening to me?" And I said, "No, look, there's a hummingbird."
Like squirrel.
And he's like, "What?" I'm like, "Look, I've never," because it was the
they
first,
move so.
their wings are so fast,
they
and
look
their
like
snout
they're
is
fake.
yeah.
They look like somebody animated a bird onto your
right, and it's so amazing how they pollinate. And I pointed out to him, and he just stopped talking immediately. He's like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing!"
Yeah.
So it's so fun. Like, and I never thought I would say this, but it's so fun to watch nature work, and it's like I enjoy watching the bees do their thing and the hummingbird do their thing, because it's as I get older and I get more invested into this journey that we're doing here with Amplify Your Garden. It's so interesting to learn how it's all interconnected.
Right, and I think, the more videos we do, I think, at least for me, I pick up little things that I'm going to implement next year.
Right.
Little benefits and little, like making sure I plant more flowers next year in my own garden. Right. And, like each video, I feel like I get at least one tip off of that I didn't do this year or wouldn't have thought to do. I
would agree. Because even just us talking, we learn from each other. Like you hand pollinated squash. That's something that I've never done, and I've been growing pumpkins for 3 or 4 years.
And I want to clarify, that's not something you have to do. It's really only if you see it becoming an issue, like fruit that just stops growing.
Right.
But I wanted to point that out because I just thought that was so interesting.
Right.
And it's an option. Like if you want to make sure you're getting, I just thought it was interesting when I learned that. That's how they pollinate that.
Yeah. That's super interesting. It's really.
But yeah, don't
freak out. It's not something that you have to do. And like, even if you are growing zucchini or say you have zucchini or cucumbers or pumpkins in your garden now, that's not something like you don't need to go worry about hand pollinating them right now.
Right.
They will still pollinate in some fashion, maybe not 100%, but they will pollinate in some fashion one way or another. So like I mentioned, I grow pumpkins, and it's in an old pasture, so it's just grass, and my dad mows it all, so there's not a whole lot of pollination.
Right.
There's not a whole lot of food outside of the pumpkins for pollinators. So not to say I don't hand pollinate and I don't grow flowers out there, but I do have, it's a noticeable, there's some pumpkins that don't get pollinated because they sit there and rot. But it is an option to self-pollinate or hand pollinate, but by no means do you have to do that.
Yeah. And I also know, I don't know if you grew up with this, but my mom, she would pluck the flowers off of the pumpkins, and she would
fry them.
She'd fry them up, get them in batter and fry them up. And I would never eat them. But now and that was me as a kid though.
Yeah, my dad was saying that too, and he's like, "Can I take those and can you fry them up for me?" And I was like,
"What do they call them? Pumpkin
blooms or something?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "We used to do that all the time as kids." And I was like, "But I need those to pollinate." Like, no, I'm not. Right. No, you can't have my.
Yeah, my mom would, like, she would literally make a batch of them all the time. It was like my childhood, but yeah.
Maybe that's something we should try.
We could, yeah. I don't know about, I'm sure you could do it with squash and zucchini and well, maybe not cucumbers, but.
No, yeah, those flowers are like,
they're about the size of tomato flowers, but.
Yeah, they're small.
But yeah, I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, it is interesting. More ways to consume a plant.
Right.
Outside of the fruit.
Yeah.
And the last thing that I want to touch on is herbs. So this is something new that I learned that I didn't really think of. Like, I always think of herbs as a way to deter pests,
right?
But never to bring in pollinators. So I think like herbs like dill and oregano will actually bring pollinators in, which is also an added benefit.
Right.
And you're also getting kind of maybe a 3-for-1. So you have the herbs to use for culinary purposes. They're deterring the pests because of the odor that they give off, but then they're also bringing in some beneficial pollinators as well. So if you needed to be sold on putting herbs in your garden, here's the sale to do that, to put those in. But I thought that was interesting as well, as maybe something that's a little bit different, and maybe flowers aren't your thing, but you want to add some herbs in. That's an option as well.
Yeah.
So that's all we have for today. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to like and subscribe, and make sure you hit the notifications button so you never miss a beat.